All right, everybody, let's go live. Wait, no, let's don't go live. I got to get a drink. Okay, now we can go live. How's it going, everybody? Chuck Holton here, coming to you from the studio in Panama. I appreciate all of you being here, and thank you for doing so. Thanks for also posting where you're watching from in the chat over there. That's really fun to watch, but it just amazes me. People from all over the place, just everywhere, all over the globe. That's crazy. Thank you, PC. Appreciate that. £9.99, what is sterling, whatever that is. And that's a good reminder that today is Giving Tuesday, and we're doing a fundraiser today for the ministry that we have to single mothers in Cartagena, Colombia. Now, most of these women are Venezuelan migrants who fled Venezuela and have been living for years in Colombia. A lot of them went to Cartagena initially just because there are a lot of tourists there, so you can make more money there if you're begging or prostituting yourself or something like that. And so we have done a lot of work to try to get these women out of that life and get them started with legitimate businesses, work permits, bank accounts, all that sort of thing. And we've actually been surprisingly successful. God has been really good to us. But here's the story is really cool. I want to stop just for a second and tell you this, what happened with these girls. So when we first met them, this was several years ago, they were all but living on the street, begging for a living. And they had their kids with them downtown at night because you can make more money if you're begging and you have a baby on your arm than you can without the baby. So we got them a place to live, started paying for a place for them to stay. And then when I went back and checked on them several months later, they had 15 people living in that one-bedroom apartment because they said, well, there's a lot of other mothers out there that are in trouble and, friends of ours or whatever. So we're just letting them stay with us. So then we got a bigger apartment and they kept growing and kept growing, but I was only paying for their apartment. And so they had to make their own money for food and things like that. So they were still out begging at night. And so we were trying to get them started in a micro business, like a little hot dog stand. We had just bought them their hot dog stand and a little coffee business. And that one of the last nights that they were going to go out and just try to beg for money, they got rolled up in a sting that was basically that movie that came out, Sound of Freedom, that it's a true story that takes place in Cartagena and just sheds light on the incredible amount of sex trafficking that happened there. And so it kind of put a stain on that city. And the mayor of that city, who is actually from New York, decided they were going to do something about that and clean up the streets. But they didn't want to touch the prostitution trade because it brings so many tourists down from the States. That's a whole story in and of itself. And so they went after the beggars and rolled up all the beggars and threw them in jail and threw their kids out in the street. So their kids were then at much greater risk of being trafficked. The children of the girls that we were supporting went to live with the grandmother of one of the kids, who is a woman that lives out just outside of Cartagena in a very, very poor neighborhood. It's just the poorest of the poor neighborhoods. And she started a little church out there because there wasn't a church for them to go to. And she couldn't find any men to get the church started. So she just started it. And they went out and lived with her. But she called me and said, look, I can't feed all these kids. There's like 12 kids here and I can't feed them all. So we said, all right, well, we'll try to get these girls out of jail. In the meantime, I will take care of the kids. I'll send you money to feed the kids. You watch them. And she said, well, they don't have anywhere to stay either. So we got her an apartment near, just cheap little place near where she lived. And so she would go bring the kids to the church during the day and then bring them home at night and stay there with them. and watched over them. Well, it ended up taking us 14 months to get these women out of jail. And it was just came down to the fact that the judge knew that there was a gringo involved and said, and wanted a bribe. And I wasn't willing to give a bribe. And so the judge said, look, if I don't get $3,000, we're going to throw these girls in prison for 20 years. And I could just see, me having to be responsible for all these children for the next 2 decades. And I was like, okay. So we paid the $3,000. I don't know if it necessarily was a bribe or if it was a legit, fee that they had to pay, like court costs and that sort of thing. They said that we could get that money back if the girls keep their nose clean for like a year. And now it's been a year and I haven't seen that money back. But anyway, long and the short of it is, when they got out of prison, these girls had such a heart for the other girls that they met in that prison. And they came to me and said, thank you so much for watching over our kids while we were gone. But there's 120 women in this prison and they don't feed them. They just feed them the bare minimum to keep them alive. If they don't have family members or somebody to bring them the things that they need, what they call aseos, like just feminine products and toothpaste and shampoo and even a mattress to sleep on, they don't have any of that. And they just sleep on a concrete floor, about 12 women in a room that's about half the size of my office. And it's no air conditioning in the heat down there. It's just brutal. So they said, we'd like to go back in there and bring the gospel to those girls and give them dignity kits of, stuff that they need, just feminine products and all that sort of thing. So we started we branched out, and the ministry sort of morphed into less supporting these women because now they have their own businesses and they're actually making their own money and they're doing okay, but more supporting the church and the outreach to the women's prison. So I have we just did one of those outreach things. And this was the girl in the red there is Wendy. She's the original girl that we supported. And the pastora is the one with her hands up there. She's praying for the girls, and they've got some supplies and stuff there on the table. They had to black out any of the faces of the prisoners, but this is them doing the distribution, passing out the dignity kits to these women. Some of these women didn't have mattresses to sleep on, so we got them mattresses. This is the pastora in the church. This is the church here. As you see how tiny that church is. And that church actually doesn't have air conditioning either. It just has fans on all over the place. And man, it is hot in there. We've been there a couple times. And so what you see here are all the kids that, not all of them, but a bunch of the kids that are going to the church. These are the kids that we were supporting while their mothers were in jail. And so now what we're raising money for today is for a Christmas party for the kids of the church. And there are about 50 or 60 or 70 of them. And it's such a small, tiny little church building, but we have helped to expand it, and we are helping to expand it even more. But we're going to do a Christmas party where we give out a gift and a decent meal to these kids that come from the poorest neighborhood outside of Cartagena, Colombia. So all of the donations that we raise during today's live are going to go to this ministry. And so I'm so appreciative of those of you who have supported the ministry in the past. We also have, what I did was I set up a Give, Send, Go. This is one that we've had going for a while. You can go to the givesendgo.com/Cartagena Project. That's really the best way to give, because it actually, they take much less. They take a very, very small percentage, like 1%, instead of YouTube's takes 30% of anything that's given. So that's the way to give if you really want to help us with this. And we're going to continue to try to help these women. And, who knows what will happen if Venezuela gets changed and a new leader gets into power. These women may go back to Venezuela and carry the gospel back there. So we'll have to wait and see. So we're just all of that to say, I know that was a long intro, but that's our quote unquote sponsor for today, is that all the money that we raise today is going to go to pay for this Christmas for the kids, and give same kind of thing to the women in the women's prison over Christmas as well. That's going to end up being several $1,000s when it's all said and done. And we're going to do it regardless. But if you want to join us in that, please go to Give, Send, Go and do that. So I'll put that up again toward the end. Now, let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. And that is that there is a, look, the war in Israel is not over. It's just mutating, right? There are still at least 5 fronts that Israel has to worry about. Of course, Gaza, it's not over there at all. As a matter of fact, it looks like let's go through the other 4. The Judea and Samaria, or what they call the West Bank, Lebanon, Hezbollah up there is still a problem. And then Iran and its proxies, and then Syria. So that would make 5. So we're going to talk about each one of those in turn today. Let's start out with what's happening in Gaza. There have been ongoing strikes inside Gaza, airstrikes, artillery strikes, and things like that. As a matter of fact, of course, mainstream media is calling all this a ceasefire violation on the part of Israel. But in actuality, this is response to ceasefire violations from Hamas. There have already been, I think, 3 IDF soldiers killed since the ceasefire took place in firefights with Hamas. They get shot at almost every day from Hamas. They have taken out more than 40 fighters emerging from tunnel systems in the zone that is, here, I've got a map here of that, in the zone that they're now calling the red zone. So the yellow line separates the red zone, which is controlled by Hamas, and the green zone, which is controlled by the IDF. They've killed more than 40 Hamas fighters emerging from tunnel systems in the green zone, and engaging with IDF forces and trying to kill them. So the fighting is ongoing. Now, this map is likely to be the map of Gaza going forward for the foreseeable future. It's not likely that this is going to shift, or that Israeli forces are going to pull out completely anytime soon. There are at least 9 militias, I guess, tribal militias, you'd call them, that exist in the green zone, who are anti-Hamas, that if Israel were to pull out today, there would be essentially a civil war inside Gaza between these militias and Hamas for control. Now, Hamas still has several thousand fighters in the red zone. They are still shooting mortars at the IDF. They're still trying to blow them up with IEDs. They have succeeded in a couple cases with that. And so I don't know how you really call this a ceasefire. Hamas never held up their end of the bargain. They were supposed to release all of the hostages right away, and they still have 2 left, but they say that one of them may be coming home today. And this is exciting news out of Gaza. This is some video here of ongoing efforts to repatriate the remains of the last couple of hostages, the last 2. One is a Thai citizen, and one is a Israeli army, I think, master sergeant, who was killed. And so Hamas turned over the remains of somebody today. And that, if it turns out to be one of the hostages, that would be amazing. And honestly, I have to admit, it's miraculous that they managed to get that there's only one hostage left in Gaza. I've been saying throughout this war that it was very unlikely Israel would ever get all of their hostages back, just because of the chaos that was the war in Gaza. And so there were people that got buried and there were all that sort of thing. But I've never been happier to be wrong on that. I mean, we still have one hostage missing. So we'll have to wait and see if they get that one back. But even still, I'm amazed that they've gotten all but one of their hostages back. If that isn't a victory on the part of Israel, then I don't know what is. There are still pundits out there like Colonel McGregor and Scott Ritter and guys like that who are, and Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, etc., who are saying Israel has lost this war. Israel is crumbling. They're collapsing. Their cities are in ruins. All this kind of just absolute clown show stuff. But it's just not true. Israel is winning this war. They are more prepared today than they have been at any point in this war for any escalation that comes in the coming days. They've got new technology that is coming online this month. Finally, the iron beam that we've talked about multiple times on this podcast. I have a video of that. We got to turn the audio off. Can't show the music or play the music on this, but this is the new iron beam that Israel is rolling out, actually putting into use starting this month. They've extensively tested it. This is a technology, by the way, that both the United States and Russia had toyed with and tried to make work and never could make work, but Israel made it work. And now that Israel made it work, that technology will trickle down to the United States and will benefit the United States greatly, especially if they go forward with this Golden Dome idea over the United States. It'd be a lot cheaper. Nathan's got a... Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Nathan says I'm leaning out of the shot. So Israel is more prepared than they have been at any time since this war began. And even though the public around the world, in the United States and elsewhere, is sort of, they've got war fatigue and they're tired of the war. And so there's not as much interest in it now as there was in the past. In reality, the risk is escalating on all fronts for Israel. So it is very, very likely that Israel is going to go back to fighting in Gaza very soon. They have sent home some of their units, especially their special forces units that have been in Gaza constantly since the beginning, and letting them get a break. I don't foresee anything kicking off before the first of the year, but in January, they may go back to fighting, because Israel has not accomplished its second goal, which was to disarm Hamas. And Hamas still has sway. They still have power in Gaza, and that is unacceptable for Israel. Now, there's a lot of internal politics swirling around in Israel. And if you're watching from Israel, I promise you, I'm not going to try to hold myself out as an expert on Israeli internal politics. But just from an outsider's point of view, I'll try to do the best I can. So please have grace with me if I don't get everything exactly right. But there's been a lot of sort of rancor in Israel over the charges that have been levied against the prime minister. Now, the charges are essentially charges of corruption, people in his office taking money from Qatar to allow money into Gaza, different things like that. This is something that's been going on for years. And it's a lot of people have said that Netanyahu doesn't want the war to end, because as long as the war is on, people are on a wartime footing and they're not going to deal with all this sort of extraneous stuff. It gives them something more important to focus on. But as the war is winding down, the calls for these investigations to ramp up have been expanding. And the court has been putting more and more pressure on Netanyahu to be there for the court hearings and to testify on his behalf. But they're talking like 3 times a week. This guy's a prime minister of a country at war. So he's saying that that's not feasible. He put out a statement that I want to play for you. I translated it from Hebrew into English. Netanyahu's English is much better than the translation in English. But he did it in Hebrew. So this is the only way I could do that and still give you the audio. Anyway, take a listen to what he had to say about this.
Almost a decade has passed since my investigations began. My trial has been ongoing for nearly 6 years and is expected to continue
for many more years.
As the exculpatory testimonies and evidence which completely collapse the false allegations against me are revealed in court, and as it becomes clear that the evidentiary basis against me was formed through the commission of serious offenses, my personal interest has been and remains to continue this process until its very end, until my full acquittal on all charges. Yes, but the security and political reality, the national interest, these dictate otherwise. The state of Israel faces immense challenges and alongside them, enormous opportunities. To repel the threats, to realize the opportunities, national unity is required. The continuation of this trial is tearing us apart from within, stirring up these disputes and deepening the rifts. I am certain, like many others in the nation, that an immediate end to this trial will greatly help to lower the flames and promote the broad reconciliation that our country so desperately needs. I have deliberated on this a lot, but recent events have tipped the balance. Due to a decision by the panel of judges hearing the case, I am required to testify 3 times a week, 3 times a week. This is an impossible demand, not required of any other citizen in Israel. Furthermore, I also considered President Trump's repeated appeals to the Israeli president. President Trump called for an immediate end to the trial so that he could, together with him, vigorously promote vital interests shared by Israel and the United States in a window of time that is unlikely to return. My dear citizens of Israel, time and again, I have been elected in democratic elections and received your unwavering trust to continue serving as the Prime Minister of Israel, first and foremost, to fulfill our nation's historical objectives.
Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that, but you get the idea. These allegations against him have been just like they are in the United States. There's very similar to the political climate in the U.S., where you have opposition parties that will do anything to take down the sitting prime minister. And so I'm not going to give you an opinion on whether or not he's guilty. All I'm going to say is that that the temperature, he's right, the temperature is rising in Israel over this trial, these allegations, and President Trump has called for Netanyahu to be pardoned and just exonerated from all of this. I don't really like that, to tell you the truth, because although many U.S. presidents have done this, including Barack Obama, I don't think the United States should be inserting itself in the internal politics of any other country. If just let it play out, right? Especially it's any other country that's an ally. So nevertheless, that's where that is. Now, over the past few weeks, and especially in the last 2 days, the violence has really spiked in Judea and Samaria. There have been several terror attacks. There were 2 in one day yesterday, both of them carried out by teenagers. There were 2 separate ramming attacks that resulted in injuries on the part of IDF soldiers. One female soldier was hit by a car. They managed to catch up with the kids driving the car, and the kids fought back and were eliminated by the IDF. The second was a similar thing where a guy tried to run over some IDF troops in near, I think it's near Gush Etzion. I could be wrong about that, but it's somewhere in Hebron. And the IDF caught the kid, 17 years old. There's a video of them talking to the kid. He's not handcuffed. He's got a backpack on. The IDF soldiers are just talking to him, and they're not really paying a lot of attention. And then the kid reaches behind him and reaches into his backpack, and they don't do anything. They're just like oblivious. And he pulls out a big knife and tries to stab the guy in the face, one of the IDF soldiers. And then he goes after the other IDF soldier. Long and the short of it is, the first IDF soldier, the wounded, is able to pull out his M4 and give this kid a dirt nap. So he shuffled off this mortal coil and took the room temperature challenge. So there's obviously some problems with that when you watch the video. By the way, I can't show you that video here because it would get me demonetized. It's too graphic, but I did put it up over at chuckholton.com. So if you go to chuckholton.com and become a supporter over there, you can get lots of extra content like this, stuff that I can't show you here on YouTube. So that video is over there if you want to watch it. But they are also calling for an investigation into the shooting of two Palestinians who were taking shelter in a building, and the IDF was trying to get them out. It was very chaotic. The video that came out that shows these guys coming out, that kind of crawling under a door, a sliding door or whatever, and with their hands up and everything, and then standing up and going back under that door into the building. And about that point, the IDF opens fire on them and eliminates them. And I have to say, the way it looks like these guys were trying to surrender and were told to go back inside, and then were shot when they did so. But we don't know what was said. We don't, obviously you can't tell from the video what was going on there. And so the IDF has called for an investigation into this incident. And if it turns out that these guys were executed or killed unnecessarily, you can bet that the guys who killed them, the IDF troops who killed them, will get prosecuted. And that's what you expect to see from a civilized country like Israel. That actually is proof that Israel is a more sane, sober, moral, just country, because when things happen that are inappropriate, they do something about it. They go after it. They don't try to cover it up. And so One Tired Mama says, does the IDF have court martials? Yes, they do. And so if these guys were in the wrong, they'll be court-martialed. There has been some further evidence that's come out since that happened that makes it sound like these guys were going back in there and actually picking up weapons in that building. So whatever it was, I mean, it's fraught with risk to try to second guess troops in the field if you're not there, even if there's a video of what happened. Same thing with police when they're doing their job. Even if you see what happened on a video, you weren't there, and there's always context that gets lost in translation. So we'll just have to wait and see what they come up with on this. So we talked about the hostage bodies coming out of Gaza. We talked about what's going on in West Bank areas. And I know people get mad at me if I say that. That's just shorthand for saying Judea, Samaria, and Hebron. And the West Bank is not the correct term for that area at all. But it's areas that the world calls the West Bank. And so I mention it from time to time just so I don't confuse people. Now, let's move on to the northern front, Lebanon and Syria. You know that the Lebanese military was supposed to have disarmed Hezbollah by now, and they haven't been able to do that. Hezbollah continues to try to reconstitute its forces. They've been receiving money from Iran and weapons from Iran. Some of them get intercepted on the way, but not all. So that's a serious concern for Israel. And Israel has said that if Hezbollah is not disarmed by the end of the year, that they will go back into Lebanon on the ground with a lot of troops, and they will disarm Hezbollah themselves. That will be a much wider operation if they do that. They have been striking from the air every day. When they identify Hezbollah targets, they go ahead and blow them up now rather than letting Hezbollah, just to keep Hezbollah kind of on the back foot. But there have been reports out of Iran that if Israel goes back to war against Hezbollah in Lebanon, that Iran will attack as well and will also try to get all of its other proxies to attack Israel at the same time. So we could go right back to the kind of fighting that we saw earlier in the war, where there are rockets coming out of the north, there are rockets or incursions coming from Syria, there are rockets and drones being fired from the Houthis in Yemen. And not only have the Houthis in Yemen continued to threaten to do so, but they have apparently sent a whole bunch of Houthi troops to Syria. And those Houthi troops are planning to invade Israel, to actually commit an October 7th style attack on Israel by coming across the border from Syria. Now, I can tell you that's going to be pretty hard for them to do, because these guys, number one, they're camel herders, and they're not soldiers. Number two, there's a large buffer zone between the areas where these guys could be congregating and the border of Israel that is now controlled by the IDF inside Syria. And number three, the IDF is on very high alert. They're much more aware now than they were on October 7th. And so these guys are going to meet their maker very, very quickly, most likely at the end of a 30 caliber, chain gun or something on an Apache or something like that. It's just there is a continuing threat, and it's not just continuing; it's rising, and the fighting has made the ceasefire, if you want to keep, calling it that, deceiving yourself, I guess, because it's not a ceasefire. But Trump is pushing Israel on this. This is where Trump is putting pressure on Israel, and I don't think it's in a good direction. There's apparently a large number of jihadi forces that are marshaling their strength in Syria, preparing to come into Israel, preparing to invade Israel. Like I said, the Houthis, it's not just the Houthis, it's a whole bunch of other, former ISIS guys and Al-Qaeda guys and who knows what, that are kind of all getting together and making plans to attack Israel from Syria. So Israel is prepared to fight them there, but President Trump is telling them, you can't do that. You have to maintain dialogue with Syria. You have to, we want the Syrian leader, al-Shara, to succeed at pulling Syria back together into a cohesive nation, stop being a failed state, allow people to return to Syria, and let's get Syria back on the road to democracy. I don't know that al-Shara is the right guy to do that. Al-Shara's rule over Syria is tenuous at best. The Institute for the Study of War has said that they believe it's very likely that al-Shara will be assassinated in the next few months by people who believe he's not jihadi enough. If that happens, then it could be that Syria falls back into chaos, and Israel will come out looking like they were very, very smart to keep their troops up there on the border. The bottom line is President Trump is basically punishing Israel for keeping a sizable force up there and being ready for that, because he thinks it is not conducive to helping al-Shara consolidate his power and lead Syria out of the civil war that they've been in for 15 years. Now, inside, this is related to that, to the south of Syria in Iraq. As you know, there are a bunch of Iranian-backed militias that maintain thousands of troops inside Iraq. We still have U.S. troops inside Iraq, a couple thousand of them. And Iran has been working very hard to control Iraq's politics, to control the prime minister and the president in Baghdad, and they've largely succeeded. So Iran really has its hooks into the Iraqi government right now, to the point where the United States felt it necessary to inform Baghdad that if Israel goes back to war with Hezbollah in Lebanon, and these Iranian-backed militias in Iraq get involved, try to insert themselves into that conflict in any way, whether it's attacking U.S. troops in Gaza or it's attacking, what's up, Nathan? I wanted to have his question answered before he had to leave. Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Arteen, and I'm from Iran right now. There's a kind of news in Iran saying, like, Israel is ready for war for Iran. Do you believe that it's going to be next war, and what will happen to Iran or Israel? Okay. Well, what we know for sure is that Israel has been making plans to strike Iran again if necessary. And what would make that necessary would be if Iran continues to try to improve its nuclear position, to repair the nuclear sites at Fordo and elsewhere that were damaged, Natanz, during the 12-day war. And so they're certainly preparing to do that, but they're always preparing to do that, right? So I don't think that means that an attack from Israel is imminent on Iran, unless Israel determines that Iran is, again, pushing forward with its nuclear program once again. Iran, for its part, always talks a big game. The regime under the Ayatollah, they're like a chihuahua. They've got a really annoying bark, but their capabilities as far as doing damage to Israel are actually pretty low. Iran says that they've been rebuilding their missile stockpile, and that if they go to war with Israel again, that they will fire 2,000 missiles at once at Israel, which would completely overwhelm Israel's Iron Beam or Iron Dome system. The problem is they don't have 2,000 launchers. At the end of the 12-day war, they were down to maybe 250 or 300 launchers max. And they're not going to be able to make, 1,500 launchers in the last several months. That's just that's out of the realm of possibility for Iran. Add to that the fact that Iran is under tremendous economic pressure right now. I'm sure that our friend that's in Iran knows how bad the economy is in Iran at the moment. They're under tremendous water pressure because the reservoirs in Iran are drying up with a drought. They're having to relocate their capital city, Tehran, to somewhere else because there's just not enough water to keep people alive in that city. And so it's not only that, there are opposition forces that are, I don't know if you want to say sabotaging, but they're certainly operating against the regime. Those forces are not friendly to the United States. They are terrorist groups in and of themselves. It would not be any better if they took over Iran from the Ayatollah Khamenei. But there is some internal strife, politically, even militarily, inside Iran. And so Iran's got a lot of major problems right now. They really cannot afford to go back to war with Israel. So what they're trying to do is, so our friend says, yes, the economy is so bad here that we don't have water, electricity, or gas because they hit our energy plants during the 12-day war. That's correct. So what Iran is trying to do is to make arrangements with all of their proxies outside of Iran. So in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, in Lebanon, etc., and very much so in Judea, Samaria, and Hebron. Okay, they've been smuggling weapons and explosives and stuff into those West Bank areas for some time, and really ramping up their efforts to do so lately. And what they're hoping to do is that if Israel goes and deploys troops into Lebanon, then all of Iran's proxies will attack at once. This is sort of what Hamas was hoping would happen on October 7th, and it didn't actually happen because they weren't very good at coordinating. The likelihood of them surprising Israel with something like that is somewhere between slim and none, because Israel has extremely good intel gathering capabilities in all of those countries. Maybe not as good in Yemen, but definitely in Iran and in Lebanon and in Syria. And I'm close with some of the intel analysts that follow what's going on in Syria and create reports for the IDF and the Israeli government on a daily basis about what's happening. And I get those reports as well. So that's one of my most trusted sources on Syria right now. So I don't think that, I think that if Israel got intelligence that an attack was imminent, whether it was from Lebanon or Iran or any place, or especially a combined attack of multiple enemies at once, Israel would make a preemptive strike, likely on Iran, as well as some of these other areas. They're already doing preemptive strikes in Lebanon every day. So I would expect that Israel would strike. So our friend in Iran, if Israel is going to strike, it's because they believe that Iran is about to strike them. And I know you don't have any control over that, but now what I do wonder, though, and maybe you can answer this question for me if you're still on, is I have seen some videos on social media lately that purport to be from Iran that show women driving around on motorcycles with their heads uncovered, people dancing, music in the streets, things like that, sort of protests, I guess, civil disobedience against the regime. I don't know how much of that is actually happening. So maybe our friend Artrine can let us know if there are protests where women are uncovering their hair and that sort of thing. I believe they are true, but it's hard to say. Now, I want to get to your questions here pretty quick. So I'm going to just show you this last thing. I've been reading a book that just came out called Hostage, and it was written by one of the Israelis who was taken hostage on October 7th. He was taken from his family, his wife and two daughters. He was taken into Gaza and he was held. And I haven't reached the end of the book, so I don't know how long he was held, but it's been more than a year at this point in the book. Artrine says they will kill us. Yeah, I'm afraid. That's what I was afraid of. So he was held in tunnels in unbelievably terrible conditions for a year. And I got this video, and this reminded me, this is one of the tunnels in Rafah that they just recently demolished. So you look here, just how cramped these tunnels are, how dirty they are. And that was a spot where they believe a hostage was held. They didn't see the sun. They were kept underground. They slept on concrete floors. Eventually, they got mattresses. You see the toilet there. They had a toilet, but it was overflowing. The drainage didn't work, so there was feces everywhere. They all got sick. They had worms. They had lice. I mean, just horrific the way they were treated. And every time there was a bombing above that affected one of the terrorists' families who was holding them, the terrorists would beat the hostages in retaliation for the bombing by the IDF. They were given one meal a day for most of the time they were under there. And you can see how just terrible that the living conditions would have been in a place like that. I highly recommend the book, but it's not for the faint-hearted. It is really, man, it just makes you go, I'm going to appreciate everything that I have. I was laying in bed at 3:00 this morning, as I often do, with my mind racing, wishing I could go back to sleep. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to feel bad that I'm laying here awake, because I'm laying here on a nice memory foam mattress with the woman I love next to me, with the dogs at the foot of the bed, and everything is right in my world. And this guy, the only thing that kept him going was imagining that he would get back to that with his family, that he would someday get out of there, and holding on to hope in there. Just an amazing story of courage. And so I highly recommend it. It's called, the book is called Hostage, and it's Ori, oh shoot, I forget his last name. Maybe Nathan can look it up and post a link to it on Amazon or something. So let's get to your questions now. And I appreciate, again, all of you that are donating, PC and everybody. Again, we're trying to pay for a very large Christmas meal and presents and everything for about 75 kids and about 120 women that are single moms in Colombia. So I love it when you all decide to join me on the things that I'm doing myself, and this is one of those kind of things. So everything we raise on today's video, including that $9.99 from PC, will go to offset the costs that we have there. So thank you, PC. Appreciate you. All right. Somebody says, has the world gone mad since COVID or before? I think that's a rhetorical question. The world's always been mad, and if anything, it's only getting madder. Next question. Witkoff is a fool. You've helped me understand what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. Thoughts on Witkoff in Moscow? I think it is absolutely horrible that an emissary of the United States government is hobnobbing with Kirill Dmitry or whatever, Dmitriev, and with his counterparts there with the Russian government. They're going out to 5-star Michelin dinners. There's videos of them walking around Moscow and like they're just best of buddies, and that is really just gross. I hate to see my country stooping so low as to not just the fact that they're sending a fool to do very important negotiations, but that fool is acting like he's best buddies with murderers and killers. So next question. Do you think the greater war is coming to add to Israel and Ukraine fronts, with North and South Korea, China, Taiwan fronts opening up as well? I do think that there are more wars coming. maybe this weekend. President Trump apparently has told Nicolas Maduro he has to leave by Friday. And so an ultimatum like that, President Trump loves to give ultimatums, but what he doesn't like to do is follow up on them. But if he were to follow up on them, then we would probably be at war by this Saturday. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. As far as China and Taiwan goes, they are continuing to be belligerent over there, and more so every day, challenging Japan, challenging the Philippines, etc. And that just means that war is more likely now than it was before. China keeps ramping up for that. So how will the winter affect the war Israel is facing? I don't think it affects Israel as much as it affects Israel's adversaries. I guess the way it affects it is it makes it more miserable in Israel for the troops that are out in the field. And I really feel for those guys. Having been an infantryman myself, it's no fun being out in the cold. Greetings from sunny Arizona. E. Jeffrey Rizzo says, do you think this conflict with Venezuela has roots in trying to manage China's influence in this part of the world? Yes, absolutely. I do. And I've said that multiple times. That's probably one of the larger reasons for doing this. It's even more important than the drug trade and all that. So yes, I think that taking that foothold in the Western Hemisphere away from China, Russia, and Iran is a very important goal of this potential conflict. Sally, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. I really appreciate that. This is the t-shirt I'd like to have. How can I buy it? This t-shirt here, this is a Black Rifle Coffee t-shirt. So you'll have to go to Black Rifle Coffee. They're not a sponsor. I wish they were, because I wear their t-shirts all the time. I like their stuff. And I know the guys who founded Black Rifle Coffee. Maybe one of these days we can talk them into being sponsors of the show. Off topic, Joe Dirt says, would it be legal to send Afghan allies to Alaska or an island? Okay, just a pet peeve. I'm not getting on your case about this, but a lot of people get this wrong. Afghani refers to the currency of Afghanistan. The people of Afghanistan are called Afghans. So the question should be, would it be legal to send Afghan allies to Alaska or an island? I know that's nitpicky, but it's just a pet peeve of mine. No, it wouldn't be legal to do that. That would smack of the internment camps that we put the Japanese in back in World War II. If we're going to get rid of them, we need to send them back to Afghanistan or give them the option of going somewhere else. We've done that, by the way. We've done that by sending people that didn't want to go back to Iran, for example. We sent them here to Panama, and they lived in Panama until they decided they found somewhere else they wanted to go. So that's something we could do. All right. Daniel says, has there been any sign of life from Iran's Ayatollah since the U.S. and Israeli strikes? Yes, there have. He's done speeches and stuff. He was not. He was not eliminated. Next, is there any way, Alton Tapley, is there any way Israel can use Iran's water problem to their advantage? It does work to their advantage because it's just one more pressure on the Iranian regime, and the more uncomfortable it gets for the Iranian people, the more likely they are to rise up and overthrow that regime. The question is what replaces them. That could be difficult. So next, what's the latest with Ukraine? I need to do a whole, live on Ukraine. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. It's kind of off topic for today, but I just returned from Ukraine. Nathan is finishing up a mini documentary on our trip to Ukraine, where we went out to the front lines in Zaporizhia, and we went out to the front lines in Kherson, and got to actually take part in some missions to bring humanitarian aid to people and rescue people off the front lines, civilians who were unable to get out on their own. So you want to stick around for that. Steve says, will you return to Israel if things heat up? Absolutely, sure will. Likely will go early this coming year, maybe even in January, depending on what happens. We'll have to wait and see. Next says, Daniel says, has there been any signs of life from that? Okay, I already got that one. That was a duplicate. Thank you for the Cheryl. I appreciate that. That's very kind. And SC 400 pilot, appreciate that as well. Steve 57 says, will the U.S. try to keep IDF from finishing Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Syrian front? They are in some sense, but in another sense, they're kind of saying, look, Israel's going to do what it has to do. So they're a little bit speaking out of both sides of their mouth, not near as bad as Biden did. They are supporting Israel in what it has to do, but they really, really want Syria to succeed under al-Sharaa. And so they are putting pressure on Israel on the Syrian front. On the Lebanese front, the U.S. envoy to Lebanon has been telling the Lebanese government, we're going to set Israel loose on you if you don't, get rid of the weapons that Hezbollah has and get Hezbollah, just disarm Hezbollah. And so they're only a political party. Now, the Pope just wrapped up a visit to Lebanon, and it'll maybe encourage you to know that he had, maybe people don't realize just how many Christians there are in Lebanon, but he did one mass yesterday that had more than 250,000 people attending in Beirut. He called for a Palestinian two-state solution in his speech. That obviously is a non-starter anymore for Israel. And the thing is, it's not because Israel isn't willing to give the Palestinians their own land. It's because the Palestinians won't agree to it. And this goes all the way back to President Clinton, who actually, I'll just play this speech for you, let you listen to what Clinton said about the two-state solution back in the 1990s.
The time Yasser Arafat didn't tell me the truth was when he promised me he was going to accept the peace deal that we had worked out, which would have given the Palestinians a state on 96% of the West Bank and 4% of Israel, and they got to choose where the 4% of Israel was. So they would have the effect of the same land of all the West Bank. They would have a capital in East Jerusalem. They would have I can hardly talk about this. And they would have equal access all day, every day, to the security towers that Israel maintained all through the West Bank up to the Golden Heights. All this was offered, including, I will say it again, a capital in East Jerusalem and 2 of the 4 quadrants of the old city of Jerusalem, confirmed by the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and his cabinet. And they said no.
So for the Pope to be talking about this is just kind of ridiculous, because the Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution. Reading this book, that was one of the things that the captors of these hostages that were being held underground would say to them every day. Israel does not have a right to exist. We own all the land. You need to go back to wherever your ancestors came from in Europe or Yemen or wherever, and all of Israel belongs to the Palestinians. It is Palestine. And they have not come off of that. They have not moderated that stance whatsoever. So it's not profitable to speak about a two-state solution no matter what. Okay, next. Can you give us your military perspective on the overall Israel defense strategy and how it's handling each front? So Israel has picketed the yellow line inside Gaza here, and they're establishing kind of more permanent, I I wouldn't say bases, but just outposts in the green zone right now, making it clear that they plan to stay there for some time. Their military strategy is that if somebody shoots at them, they're going to shoot back. Right now, that is how they are saying, we're not violating the ceasefire. Hamas is violating the ceasefire, and we're just shooting back. That's all. In Syria, their military strategy is to take that large buffer zone that is inside Syria, right up to the outskirts of Damascus, and hold that area and control that area as well. And if Hezbollah doesn't want Israel to do the same with the area between the border and the Litani River in Lebanon, they better give up their weapons, because Israel's strategy in Lebanon right now is to strike at anything that looks even remotely like Hezbollah infrastructure, Hezbollah fighters, Hezbollah commanders, Hezbollah arms caches, everything. And they have such good intelligence, because they're not just running human intelligence, but they've got a tremendous amount of signals intelligence that they install all over the place. You know, the Operation Beeper? I can guarantee you there's some electronics floating around inside Lebanon that are being listened to by Mossad. And so they have very good intel on who the bad guys are and where they are and where they're going. And so they blow them up on a regular basis, and they're going to continue to do that. So that's their military strategy. All right, next question. Thank you, Rainey. I appreciate that. Cheryl, thank you for answering my question. Can we all pray for the brave men and women of these winter battles? Let's do that at the end. Next question. What was the end result of the Syrian leaders' visit, as I haven't seen anything on the news? I believe the Syrian leaders' visit to the United States is one of the reasons why President Trump is putting pressure on Israel not to go too hard inside Syria, because they know that this new regime in Syria, which is not legitimate, it was, they were not voted for and everything, but they're hanging by a thread. Again, they believe that al-Sharaa may very likely get himself assassinated before too long. So they don't want Israel putting a lot more pressure on them. But Israel's doing what it has to do in there. All right, next question. Whatever happened to the Palestinian Authority? Oh, they're still around. And I mean, they're still doing their thing, pay for slay and all that. They had taken a back seat during this war because they have not been actively engaged in fighting against Israel, at least not in an organized sense. But they're still around, and they have said that they're willing to take over the management of Gaza, to which Israel says, yeah, no, not happening. Afghanistanian is incorrect, and yes, that's incorrect. They're called Afghans. Question. Steve says, will Trump be against the idea of projecting necessary force in Gaza because it interferes with the 21-point plan? I think once they get all the hostages out, Israel is going to go back to fighting. Now, I don't know what the Trump administration is going to say about that. Israel has every justification under the 21-point plan to go back to fighting in Gaza, because Hamas has broken the ceasefire so many times already. It's in shambles. So yeah, thank you. Next, Calito Racing says, what do you think is Cuba's role in Venezuela? Are they still propping up Maduro, or has Wagner taken on that role? Actually, I believe Wagner is pulling out. I know Russia was sending planes in there to get all of their citizens out of Venezuela yesterday. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Next question. I'm taking my mom to, and you asked about Cuba. Cuba, I think, is really watching what's going on in Venezuela, and they're worried because if it works, the regime change works in Venezuela, then the same kind of pressure might work for regime change in Cuba. And that would take another pawn of Russia off the table in the Western Hemisphere. Next, Natasha, I'm taking my mom to Israel in late February Any advice regarding weather prep? Yeah, be ready for wet and cold. People think Israel's all desert, but Israel gets pretty cold, especially, I mean, Jerusalem's up high, you know, on the mountain kind of, and they actually get snow. So actually, I was in Israel once when it snowed at the Dead Sea, which never happens. And nobody even believed that it happened. Joe Dirt says, how many Americans are currently in Israel? What's the U.S. policy protecting Americans overseas? Don't know exactly how many Americans are in Israel. There are a lot of dual citizens who are in Israel, American, Israeli citizens, probably 150,000, something like that. It's a lot. And does the U.S. government or embassy have a plan to get them out? I don't know. They really didn't have much of a plan to get them out. They did a couple of humanitarian flights out at the beginning of the war, but nothing that was really organized. There was even people like renting yachts to get to Cyprus and stuff like that. Okay, Caddy Mac says, how often does your wife travel with you and what does she do when you're at work? She travels with me as much as I can talk her into traveling with me. Obviously, I'm not going to take her to some place that would be dangerous, but she'll come closer so that I don't have to be away from her as much. Because I'm on the road more than 200 days a year, and I don't want to be away from my wife 200 days a year. That's just not a workable solution for us. So she does travel with me in a large part of my travels. A lot of times we're traveling, including travel to go see the grandkids in the travel that I do, and she's not going to miss that. So she says she wants to stay home here more in Panama next year. We'll have to wait and see if I can con her into going with me. Next question. Where's the headquarters of the Palestinian Authority? It's in Samaria. I don't know. I think it's in Jenin, but I could be wrong about that. It's a good question. George Peach says, I love this content. Chuck Holton, do you get amazed by how this all was foretold that's in our Bible? Do you think the USA's turning on Israel before God's return? Or do you see USA turning on Israel before God's return? I really think that the United States is the new Babylon. And so what I believe is that the United States will essentially cease to exist as a coherent nation before God's return. So we'll see a balkanization of the country into maybe 3 to 5 countries. And it's not going to be getting a lot better. It's one of the reasons I came out with my book, Death of Civilization, and my new book, which is coming out early next year, called Red Teams, because I want to help Christians get prepared for the days that are coming. Do you think, next question, do you think it's a good idea? Oh, wait. Can a non-Jewish person immigrate or become a citizen of Israel? Yes, they can. It's not easy, but they can. Do you think it's a good idea for us to go visit family in Trinidad during Christmas and New Year's? Sure. Trinidad's going to be fine. I'm not worried at all about Trinidad. Venezuela has made some threats that they would strike Trinidad if the United States struck them. I don't think that would happen because the pushback from the United States would be pretty fierce. So I'm not worried about it. I would go if I were you. All right. That's all the questions I got. I'm not taking any more questions on Venezuela today. So I do want to remind you that we're doing a fundraiser today for the single moms and the women that we are caring for and discipling and bringing the gospel to in Colombia. And so you can donate to that project by going to givesendgo.com/Cartagena Project. And I appreciate all of you who have donated and are donating for that mission, because we send those girls more. I mean, the church, the girls, the prison, all of that ministry costs more than $25,000 a year to do. So every little bit helps. All right. Thank you very much for that. And before we go, I have our sponsor, actual sponsor for today's broadcast is Brightcore. Once again, our friends over there. And they wanted me to replay the package that I made about microplastics. And this is fascinating stuff. So you're going to want to stick around for this because microplastics are in everything. And take a listen to what I had to say about that. Going down a bit of a rabbit hole. You know how that goes. You read one article and then another, and suddenly you're 10 studies deep and wondering if you need to go live in a bubble somewhere. For me, the rabbit hole was microplastics. Now, these tiny particles are everywhere. And the more I read, the worse it gets. At first, I thought, okay, easy fix. Stop microwaving leftovers in plastic, ditch the bottled water, and avoid eating off anything that says made in China. Done. Problem solved. Yeah, not even close. Turns out the majority of microplastics we ingest don't come from bottles at all. They come from the air we breathe. So every deep breath, congratulations, you just ingested another dose of microscopic garbage. And then I found studies suggesting microplastics might be linked to declining testosterone in men. Now, that one got my attention because if modern life isn't busy enough trying to kill us, apparently it also wants to turn us all into soy boys. So fantastic. Now, scientists have literally found microplastics inside blood clots, and yes, that means a higher risk of heart attacks and strokes.
White ones, we've got clear ones.
Tons of microplastics wash ashore all over the world every day. And now for the first time, scientists in the Netherlands have detected microplastic pollution in human blood.
All the microplastics and nanoplastics we are exposed to, we inhale and we ingest, that actually, there's so much plastic that it can even enter our bloodstream.
The Dutch study on blood samples from healthy adults detected tiny plastic particles in 80% of people.
And it's not just your cardiovascular system either. There's also found it in the brain, which, let's be honest, explains about half of the comments section that I see on YouTube these days.
And we start with a new study on the impact of microplastics, which found human brains contained as much plastic as a plastic spoon, which is up 50% from 2016.
What we're finding is in the brains of people who have dementia, there's actually higher amounts of microplastics. So essentially, these microplastics, or these tiny little particles of plastics, are crossing the blood-brain barrier, and they're depositing into our brain. And they're being correlated with increased risk of neurodegenerative diseases like dementia, possibly linked to autism and other things that affect the brain. There's also evidence showing increased risk of stroke, and increase inflammation overall. So I have always said, listen, there's no way to avoid microplastics entirely unless you're going to live in a bubble. And by the way, that bubble couldn't be a plastic bubble. It'd have to be a glass bubble.
And if you didn't already have enough to worry about, like a plastic spoon worth of microplastic in your body, here's a fun one: missile launches. Yeah, apparently every time a rocket goes up, it sprays microplastics into the atmosphere. The nearly 40,000 missiles that were fired into Israel during the war, well, each one of those helped pollute the planet just a little bit more. So it's not just Israel's problem anymore. It's your problem too. So thanks, Hamas. Appreciate the global contribution. So avoiding plastic forks isn't going to cut it. You can't exactly hold your breath the rest of your life, which kind of left me wondering if there's any way to actually get this junk out of my body. Turns out there is, and it's not from some high-tech lab, it's from kimchi. Scientists found a bacteria in kimchi called Bacillus pumilus that can actually degrade toxic BPA plastics, which means while you're eating fermented cabbage, those microbes are basically running search and destroy missions inside your body. Even RFK Jr. was on Fox and Friends swearing by kimchi.
Mainly meat and then fermented vegetable, anything fermented. So a lot of kimchi and all kinds of fermented vegetables. And it's really, I would say it's dramatically changed my, everything.
I figure if it worked for him, maybe it's worth a look. Now, full disclosure, I've never been a fan of kimchi. I don't want my fridge smelling like a science experiment just to get the benefits. So that's where Brightcore Nutrition comes in. They're not some sketchy supplement startup. They're a trusted American company making clean, non-GMO, all-natural products And now they've bottled the power of kimchi into a capsule called Kimchi 1. No cabbage, no chili paste, no funky smell, just all the probiotics, live enzymes, and antioxidants you get from kimchi. Over 900 strains of good bacteria without the taste. On top of potentially helping with microplastic detox, Kimchi 1 also supports digestion, reduces bloating, boosts energy, strengthens immunity, and even improves skin and hair. So it's basically kimchi without all the baggage. So here's the deal. Go to mybrightcore.com/Chuck and use promo code Chuck for 25% off. Or if you want the best deal, pick up the phone and call 888-927-6882. When you call, you can get up to 50% off plus free shipping. And if you're one of the first 100 people to call, you'll also get a free bottle of vitamin D3. But remember, you only get that 50% off when you actually call the number. So again, that number is 888-927-6882. So look, we can't stop modern life from trying to kill us between seed oils and social media, and now missiles sprinkling microplastics into the stratosphere. The deck is kind of stacked against you, but we can at least fight back. Kimchi 1 is one small, simple step that can keep you from feeling like a human Ziploc bag. So hit the link or call now. Your heart, your brain, and maybe even your testosterone will thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching today's podcast. I promised Cheryl that we'd pray before we got done. So let's do that and then we'll go. Lord Jesus, I just come to you and I ask that you would just be with the soldiers who are on the front lines defending their countries in Ukraine and in Israel. Father, I pray that you be with the American troops who are all around the world, and especially those who may be going into harm's way soon in over Venezuela. Father, I just pray that you would thwart the plans of evil men. That's a prayer that we always pray. That you would continue to keep your hand on Israel and just miraculously protect her. Thank you that we can trust you, Lord. We can come to you and bring you our own problems, our own tragedies, and that you will make yourself very real to everyone that's listening to the sound of my voice. Thank you for those who have donated today to just selflessly help these girls and their children get closer to you as well, and to just let the gospel spread among the least of these. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Thank you very much for watching, folks. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.